I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's the 8th meeting in 2025. The meeting is being live streamed on the Town of Perth YouTube channel. And the first thing I'm going to do is ask the Mayor if you would read the adoption of the agenda, please, Your Worship.
I move that the agenda for the Special Committee of the Whole meeting of August the 12th, 2025 be adopted as presented.
Any questions? No, nothing. Called the question. Those in favour? And that's unanimous by everybody that's here. Next is disclosure of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest. Usual rules apply on that one. If you have one now, declare it. If something happens during the course of the meeting, declare it then. I see none at this point, so I'll move on. Before we move to the main part of our meeting here today, the Mayor has requested to make a statement. So if you'd like to go ahead, Your Worship.
I'm sorry, I'm really having difficulty hearing you.
Okay, you requested to make a statement, Your Worship, so if you'd like to go ahead
okay.
now.
You want me to do that now? Thank you. So as we make this start to the budget process, this is hard to believe that this is the last budget we'll ever do with this group. So it's a time of change, and whatever budget we conclude, it will be a legacy, and it will set the tone for the next council. We have a choice between heightening taxes, borrowing, or both. I think we have to look at the big picture, not just trying to keep tax increases as low as possible. We're on the edge of tremendous growth. Perthmore, going to start building houses soon. The Meadows is on the cusp of starting to build their last phase there. And we have the ever-present Cavan. Our population's already grown by 750 in our term. This year, we have issued, 64 building permits with a total fees collected of $207,365.54. And of that, half of them meet the criteria for affordable housing. So in the near future, with the growth, the next council is going to have to face the idea of building another water tower and possibly an additional fire station to serve the needs of north of 7. I want to thank Nev for her work in providing this analysis so we can begin this task of a budget for the future.
Thank you, Your Worship. We move on to item 4, the reports by Director Jandy. Just want to let Council know quickly, so it's kind of housekeeping all the way things are going to run. During the course of the presentation, there are built-in periods for questions. I would like every councillor member present to have the chance to, in those sections, either, if they want to ask questions, ask up to 2 of them, and then we'll move on. At the end of the presentations, we'll have a more chance to ask questions. That's just in order to keep things moving. And the other thing I just want to remind Council is that this is all education and learning today. Nothing here is going to be decided in relation to the budget. Okay, Director Jandy, thank you.
So I think the first item was the carry forwards and the approval of the 2024 carry forwards into 2025. So my understanding is that the carry forwards are to be approved by council every year. One of the assumptions that was built in to the 2025 budget when you had approved it was that the carry forwards from 2024 would be $3.3 million. So that was included, that was approved, but what wasn't provided at that time was an itemized list of all the projects and what the values were. So that was what I was hoping to provide you today. And when I started going and I started here, what I had noticed that was that management was coming up to me, asking me the amounts that they had left in their carry forwards. And I noticed there was a discrepancy between the listing that I had and what they were asking about. So what I ended up doing was completing a reconciliation back from 2022 of all the projects and kind of going through to say what was completed, what was the dollar values that were spent on it, and what would have been left over. And when I did that reconciliation, what I noticed was there was about $800,000 of a difference between what was brought forward in the carry forward as a carry forward amount in the 2025 budget and the amount that I had came up with. So at this point, I just wanted to clarify that none of these are new projects. These were all projects that were approved in 2024 or before. And it was just amounts that were either multiple year contracts that, you know, are going to be carried forward again because they span over more than 1 year, obviously, whether it was just contract timing and when the project started to when it's going to be completed or just other delays that occurred. So, yeah, that was, so the amount that's going to be through. So if you go, not really, I don't know if it's in, you go to the second slide, if you don't mind. And the next one from there. Thank you. So here's the reconciliation I did. So you'll see in the first column is obviously all the projects that were undertaken. The second column shows that whether it was coming out of originally the operating capital or the water budget. And then the next column was what I had recalculated based on my reconciliation going back. And then the next column was what was actually presented in the 3.3 million in the budget. And then the variance from that. So there's really 3 projects that really were the major factors that were left out between what I calculated and what was presented in the budget. The first one was roads pre-engineering. So this was costs that were approved in regards to having an engineer on retainer for any of our roads projects going forward so that we didn't have to go to tender. We didn't need to wait. We just have the funds set aside so we can get that work done before we get started. And the other 2 big, larger amounts were just the completion of Tom and Cockburn Street. So these, again, were projects that were pre-approved, but just haven't been completed at this point and will be completed this year. So those were the major items that came up with that variance. I don't know if there's any questions at this point, but that was really all I wanted to present on that. So in regards to this, I think there is a motion in regards to approving the carry forward amount.
Sorry, if the Deputy Mayor, if you could make that motion, please.
Moved by myself as recommended by Committee of the Whole, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Perth approve the carry forward to 2025 of the unspent 2024 project budget set out in the attached Schedule A as presented in Report COW 2025 8.1.
A question, Your Worship?
So what happens with
Yeah. So it's funds that were approved and that are being held. So yes, in a bank account before they are spent. So it's just making sure that we don't spend that money on anything else because it's already been held for something else.
Any further questions? No, then I'll call the question. Those in favour? That's unanimous from everybody that's here. So if you'd like to continue now with the finance update.
Perfect. So today's finance update is really designed. Oh, is that better? Okay. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So today's finance update is really designed to give you all a clearer picture of where we stand financially, what pressures we're currently facing, and discuss how we can really plan for the future. I don't think any of this information is going to be new, but more of a refresher and things to think about as we go into the 2026 budget season. My goal today is to really ensure that you feel informed, confident, and equipped to make decisions that balance our service delivery, our infrastructure renewal, and taxpayer affordability when it comes to time to review the 2026 budget. I know that the slide deck wasn't provided in advance, and so I just wanted to clarify that the reason why I had decided to do that is that a lot of the information that I will be presenting today is hypothetical and what ifs. So it's not factual to say this is exactly what we're going to be doing going forward. And I think because I tried it to make it more visual, and not as wordy on there. I didn't want that to go out without the context that it was coming from. So I wanted to share the slide deck after I was able to provide the context to everyone. So I just wanted to clarify that before we started. So here's kind of the roadmap that I have set out for today. It may not be the most exciting topics for everybody, but I am hoping that we can have some really robust conversations around them. So starting, I really wanted to set the tone for this meeting with objectives that I had, ensuring that the next hour or so are really based on transparency, education, and collaboration. I then wanted to go into just a refresher of the 2025 budget and kind of the objectives and things that went into kind of creating that. So we were all on the same understanding. I wanted to go into the impact of what the carry forwards would look like onto the budget, our reserve health, looking at our capital plans and how that relates to our annual repayment limit, and then kind of having a robust conversation on funding strategies. So as I mentioned, I really wanted to set the tone for this meeting and set clear objectives of what I wanted to achieve today. So first, I wanted to reaffirm the understanding, like I said, of the 2025 budget and its assumptions. So reviewing the objectives, assumptions, and principles that really went into making the 2025 budget. I wanted to also re-educate everyone on the annual repayment limit and its implications. So going through what the ARL is, looking at our history of debt usage at the town, and discussing conservative borrowing thresholds. I wanted to review our reserve health and discuss strategies on how to stabilize them. I wanted to present to you the long-term capital planning priorities. So discussing our capital expenditures forecast for the next 10 years, what that looks like through our asset management plan, and emphasizing more prioritization of renewal over expansion. I wanted to discuss funding strategies, including tax, debt, and hybrid models. And like I had said before, I really want to promote transparency and strategic alignment when we're making financial decisions so that we can make budget decisions with strategic and community goals. So those really were my objectives for today. I'm not sure if anyone else had any other objectives that they were hoping to achieve or wanted to add to the list.
So that's the first opportunity for any questions. Probably not at this point. No, see none.
Perfect. So for the budget, a refresher, I wanted to kind of go through the budget objectives, assumptions, and principles. Next slide, if you don't mind. So budget objectives and assumptions, they're really the practical and operational elements that really guide the development of the budget. The objectives are really what the municipality wants to aim to achieve, and it usually can be multi-year. So this is looking at things that financial stability, what your service level delivery looks like, and infrastructural investments. Your assumptions are really the estimates and the forecasts that are used to go into the budget. So that's things like the tax rate, your increases in inflation, if you're getting any grant funding and things like that. So those can be very specific to the budget year and can change annually. So for the 2025 budget objectives, they were really focused on financial stability, service delivery, and infrastructure investment. So for long-term financial stability, it was really to contain and maintain a positive reserve balances throughout, obviously, prudent fiscal management, implement tax rate increases to keep pace with inflation and infrastructure needs, support our core municipal services. So what was considered essential, and I think that I wanted to make sure that we talk about is that roads, water, wastewater, fire protection, and recreation were all considered essential services, and to be able to continue service delivery at the current levels that we were doing before. In regards to capital priorities, it was to invest in our infrastructure, guided by our asset management plan. Obviously, to promote transparency and accountability, so presenting a clear budget, and also planning responsibly for growth and change. So obviously preparing for our projected growth and aging demographics, and ensuring that our infrastructure and services can meet future demands. So those were the objectives, and the assumptions that went into the budget were that obviously there was a property tax increase of 10%, and there was going to be a 6% increase there, therefore after annually. Water and sewer rate increases of 6%. The only confirmed grants that went into the budget at the time was OCIF and the OMPF. The dollar values there are kind of the expenditures that were going to be included. The reserve forecast at the time when the budget was created was that the capital reserve was going to decline to $4.8 million by the end of this year. Our water and sewer reserve was projected to decline at 4, and that it was also projected that the reserves would continue to decline unless it was offset by further rate increases or service adjustments. In regards to capital planning, the carry forward projects, as I said, well, we know is no longer 3.3, but that was included in the budget assumptions at the time. And the budget assumed inflationary increases in regards to operational and capital costs as well to maintain our current service levels. For budget principles, this is really the philosophy and the foundation behind the budget. So the main budget principles are around these 5 areas. So accountability, so ensuring that we have transparency, sustainability, maintaining long-term financial health, equity, that we're distributing our resource fairly across all programs and demographics, aligning our budget to make sure it supports the strategic plan, and prudence in regards to having more conservative efforts to avoid any uncertain revenue amounts. So for the 2025 budget principles, these were the 4 main areas, was that to 1, maintain service levels, 2, to make sure we used our reserves strategically, 3, prioritizing capital renewal over expansion, and 4, ensuring that our user fees reflect cost recovery. So this is more just a refresher, and what I wanted to do is set the base, because any of my projections or forecasts were really based on those objectives, assumptions, and principles. So I thought this would be a good point and time to have a discussion on if any of those things, if they still resonate, if there's any changes in your thoughts on any of those areas, so that when I'm going into the 2026 budget season, I can think about those as well.
Questions, observations, Councillor Waterfield?
Through the chair, have you had an opportunity to look at the history of property tax and water and sewer increases during the past, say, 8 to 10 years? And if so, do you think that they've been adequate? And if they have been adequate, fine. But if not, does that reflect the situation we're currently in financially?
I have taken, through the chair, sorry. I have taken a look at some of the past percentage increases in regards to taxes and water increases. I think what's difficult, Councillor, is that I wasn't here during that time. So I think for me to comment on whether it was the right decision at that point in time, I can't in good faith say that yes or either way, because I wasn't here to look at that or to be part of that decision. I think the point of this presentation is today is to say this is where we are at now. So what can we do to move forward? I think in any situation, the past has some obviously implication of where you end up being now. But I mean, I can't really comment in regards to whether that is the reason we're at today.
Follow up, if I may, through the chair. I appreciate your response. I and perhaps other councillors would be interested in just simply getting the facts as to what the increases have been, say, for the past 10 years. Is that something that's easily accessible?
I'm sure I can find that information.
Yeah, I would be interested in that. I know the recent during this council but I don't know the history prior to that. And for myself and perhaps other councillors, it would be nice to look at that historically, that's been during the past decade or so.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
If I can just add a little bit more to Nev's comments, that I think most municipalities in North America are facing similar things. And if we look back for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, sure, we should have been collecting, or maybe it would have been ideal to be collecting a little bit more money. I think councils everywhere made the best decisions they could at the time with the information they had and meeting those circumstances and environments. We are Councillor Bird commented earlier, if we had a time machine, we can go back and change things like we could with many decisions, perhaps. This is where we are today.
Sure.
Council has, I think it's commendable of this council that you're looking at all these things now. We're not at the point of doom and gloom and no options. Council has options, and that's the point, or part of the point of the discussion today. So.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Am I correct in remembering that there have been no tax increases, property tax increases for 11 years?
If I may, if I may, just to clarify, see if we can help sort this out. Councillor Waterfield and yourself, Councillor Smith, are you perhaps referencing the point that the previous?
Could you speak into the mic, please?
Yeah, sorry. Are you referencing the fact that we had information from council from the previous financial director that the effect of a long period of certain tax increases or no tax increases had the effect of a negative overall tax increase? Is that what you're referring, that information from the past?
Partially, but I'm just curious personally as to what the history of tax increases have been during the past, say, decade, if they're easily accessible. And I quite agree, we need to concentrate on the here and now and what we can plan for the future. This is the whole point of this being together this afternoon. But I would just like to see that history out of curiosity.
Does that answer your question at all, Councillor Smith, or is?
No, but if we do go back over the past 10 years, we will find out exactly what it was.
Thank you. Any other questions, observations? Deputy Mayor.
In the past several years, we've been presented with the budget principles as the first step in the budget process, but in my mind, the budget had already been decided by the treasurer at the time. And this year, I would like you to present us the budget principles and give us a chance to discuss them prior to you beginning the budget process.
Through the chair, that is why I wanted to go through all of those areas today before we kind of went through the rest of the material, because I do want each of you to think about that those were the principles for last year and whether they still resonate with council or not. So, and if it doesn't, you know, it's a great forum right now to have those conversations, to be able to say, you know, these are areas that we may need to change, so that I am aware before I even come up to you with the same budget principles that we've had this year, right? So that we can be all on the same page before we start that budget process.
Any others? Nope, thank you. Continue.
Perfect. So the next section was really the carry forwards. There's really nothing more to go through. We had gone through this already in the previous motion. The only thing I really wanted to highlight in this area is that I do have spoken with management. We have all agreed as well. I think that the kind of request going forward, or our hope going forward, is that the list of carry forwards that go through year over year would not be wouldn't be significant, right? Where they are really just contracts that are multi-year, or they're projects that obviously we knew were going to span over a few years, or if they were delays in regards to contracts. So not just holding money for things that we hope to achieve, but will not be able to achieve that year. And really, we're looking at our projects year over year of what we are set out to do, and making sure that those are completed, so that the amount on that carry forward list does get smaller. I wasn't sure if there was any other comments that anyone had in regards to that.
I don't see any, so Karen,
Right.
please.
So the next section is really in regards to our reserve balances and our forecast on the reserve. So I think one of the questions that have always come up when I have come to any council meetings is where are our reserves actually at? So I thought it would be a really great time to kind of go through everything and have an open discussion on that. So going back to what our reserve balances were supposed to look like at the end of this year based on the budget. So our capital reserve was projected to decline to 4.8. Our water and sewer reserves were projected to decline to 4, and it was projected that our reserves would continue to decline unless we kind of did something to offset the costs. So the next slide, this one that's on here right now, is kind of what was projected within the budget. So it was kind of projecting what we thought we would be at in regards to the reserves at the end of 2024, the different projects that we were going to do, any additional financing. And then you came up to the projected balances at the end of the year, which came up to that 4.8 and the 4 in regards to water and sewer and capital. What I ended up doing because of those questions that I had heard is what I did is for any of the projects that were then kind of came up to council for approval post budget, what I did is anything that came that was going to come out of the capital reserve or the water reserve, I kind of just listed them out. So these are all the projects that have been approved since January and kind of detail out what reserve it was going to come out of. So now I kind of completed based on that where we actually are looking to end up at the end of 2025. So you'll see that the projected balances at December 31st, 2024 are actually different. The total dollar value is actually higher, but the actual mix is different. And that's based on our audited financial statements. Nothing really changed in regards, obviously, to the projects and the debt financing and things like that. But I did include the additional projects that we have incurred now in 2025 that were not included in the budget. And that gives you the balance of where I'm projecting us to be at this point at the end of the year. So what that would look like is that the capital reserves are now projected to decline to 3.2 million by the end of the year instead of the projected 4.8. Our water and sewer reserve is now projected to decline to 3.8 instead of the 4 million. And it doesn't change in regards to the continued use of our reserves unless we do something to offset that. I don't know if there's any questions at this point in regards to the reserves and where we're at.
Councillor Waterfield.
Through the chair. So with regards to the projected balances in these various reserve funds at the end of the year, what do you think should be the absolute minimum each fund we should have for this municipality? And how does that compare to your projection?
I think where we're at in regards to our projection, sorry, through the chair, I'm going to have to get used to that. Is that I think where we're at right now, I'm comfortable with. I think where if we were to decline further, I might have a bit more reservation in regards to that. I do look at my management team to be really more the experts of what's needed in each of those areas. So like water and sewer, for example. I'm not the expert in that, right? And so I've had those conversations, but I do think, and I can know that if we had anything less than 4 million, and if something were to happen, I'd want to make sure we had enough money for our water and sewer to be able to take care of that. So at this point, I think we're okay. I think if it continued to decline, then I think that there would be concern.
Follow up?
Thank you. As a follow-up, so thank you for your answer. But what I'm hearing is that we're at the end of this year, we'll be at the absolute minimum for each fund.
I wouldn't, through the chair, I wouldn't want to decline our reserves in anymore. If that's the question you're asking, I wouldn't want it to be, we would have to fund it in another way. Yes.
No one else at this point is jumping in, so you can take someone else's time.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to have a follow-up. So since we are projected to be at a minimum by the end of the year, what mechanism can we put in place for the next couple of budgets to increase those reserves while still meeting our other operational expenses, et cetera, et cetera? I'm not comfortable having our reserves right at the bare minimum. And there's all kinds of variabilities throughout a given year.
Mhm.
So is there any mechanism in terms of planning next year's budget and beyond that we could try to increase the reserves beyond the bare minimum?
For sure. And I, through the chair, we will go through different areas when we continue to go through the presentation. But some of the areas that you could consider, our council could consider, is obviously using debt, is using different funding strategies. So it's a hybrid of using obviously tax increases to pay for some infrastructure, generating new ways of revenue, ensuring that we have grants for major projects, things like that are all avenues. And I think that, my hope for today is that we kind of have these conversations so that we know that the mix of how we do things needs to change so that these reserves can stay at a healthy level.
Thank you. I just make a quick comment, if I may, Chair. I
ahead.
think this is something that we really need to keep an eye on for this budget, for this council, and for the next council as well, because it's very important that we have our reserves always healthy, because you never know what's going to happen. Thank you.
I'm seeing nothing else, so continue, please.
Perfect. So the next section is really our capital planning outlook. So this was more looking at our capital expenditures over the next 10 years. So I wanted to kind of build each of my sections onto the other. So we talked about reserves, where they're going to be at the end of the year. So now let's look at what it looks like over the next 10 years. So the asset management plan is kind of how the capital expenditure framework kind of looks like and is based on, but is also based on the principles that were set out in the 2025 budget. So again, that was maintaining service levels, using our reserves strategically, prioritizing capital renewal over expansion, and ensuring that our user fees reflect our cost recovery. So this is this slide is kind of one of the reasons why I did not want to send out our slide deck in advance. So what I ended up doing was I took out our asset management plan, which kind of sets out all of our infrastructure, what needs to get completed, when it needs to be completed by, and kind of gives a dollar value in regards to that. And this is kind of what it looks like when you take it out and break it out year by year. That's what I wanted to do to kind of create the 10-year financial plan. So when I looked at this, I was like, I don't know if you see the same thing. I didn't think that this was feasible. So not only in regards to the dollar value of all the assets that would need to be completed, but the number of projects in some of the years just didn't equate into what would actually be feasible for the town to complete. So what I had asked and what we did as a management team is met together, and currently management is looking year by year and the projects that have been set out for each year to reprioritize on whether it is critical to complete, why it's critical to complete, what the impact would be on the residents if it wouldn't be completed, and be able to see if it had to be completed in that year or if it could be shifted to another year or not. And so that exercise is being done right now, so that when we have, and I'm hoping what will end up happening is that this graph would be more fluid and you wouldn't see really big spikes year over year. And then I can complete a 10-year financial forecast, and I would be able to then say, okay, by 2030 or 2031, our debt levels are going to be enough. What are we going to do going forward? But I didn't want to project that out now on something that I knew wouldn't be really reflective of what was going to happen. I did want to take this moment because I think our management team has spent a lot of time in regards to looking at this asset management plan and prioritizing, and I just know it was a really big effort on their part as well to go through year by year to look at all of the projects and be able to do that. So I just wanted to say thank you to our team to be able to work with me and to really put the time in to get this outlook as feasible as possible. Obviously, things change year over year. Things can happen, but at least then we have a clearer picture of what things are going to look like over the next 10 years. Slide. So this, again, is a hypothetical. If we use that asset management plan of what our reserves would look like if we completed that information. So where you see the dip, so in 2027, 2030, 2032 is where I've actually injected some debt so that our reserves would stay at at a pretty reasonable rate. But what you'll notice in 2035, there isn't even enough debt to be had to be able to fund all the infrastructure renewal that we'd have. So is this a clear picture of where we're actually going to be at? No, which is why I didn't want to send this out beforehand. It would be, well, maybe there's projects in 2035 that can be pushed out further. Or it could be the opposite. Maybe there's projects that we have to do by 2035 and we need to push them out even closer. But I just wanted to show this visual to say within the next 10 years, we won't be able to just say that we can use debt to be able to keep our reserves at a healthy level. The next slide is more in regards to water and sewer. So that one does look a bit more favorable. But again, in 2031, I have injected debt there to be able to increase our water and sewer reserves to keep them at a sustainable level. So if you combine the two together, at some point between 2030 and 2035, our debt amounts would be maxed out at where we're at right now. So that was all I had for that part, but I'm sure we might have some questions.
Your worship.
If I understood correctly, say in a given year, there was an infrastructure item that needed to be replaced. But if you did that, it was be either increasing or decreasing our reserves too much, or putting the amount that we had to borrow at too high a level. Would that infrastructure replacement then be like bumped to the next year?
Through the chair. So that's kind of what we're doing right now, is looking at all the priorities and looking year over year to see what is actually critically that needs to be done and see whether we would have enough funding in regards to the tax increase. Again, like I'm using the assumptions of the 6% increase in taxes, right? On how much funding or how much debt would need to be used. So I am hoping that when I come in the fall, that and this exercise has been completed, that we have a better understanding of where we're actually going to fall, where we think that our debt would be no longer available to us, or we'd be capped out, I guess I should say. And that's where I think the prioritization from council would also be required to say, if this is critical, we need to find a different way of funding for it.
So if I could, second question. As we expand, there's going to be some items that the town would have to pay for example, some streets before the developer assumes them. So how would you handle that kind of expense? Or maybe you plan on dealing with it later in the presentation.
Through the chair, yeah. So we do discuss that a bit further in the presentation. But again, I think those are things that we'd have to come to. Like the asset management plan is a living document. That's how I look at it, right? So it's not, this is our asset management plan. This is what we're going to do every single year. Every year, we're going to have to take a look at it. This year, I think it's a bigger task, because I think when I got here, there was a year over year up to 2029. So there was that projection, but 2030 to 2035 wasn't there. And you can see that's where the really big spikes are. So I think every year we're going to have to take a look at the prioritization of the next year and say, okay, is this feasible? Where are we at? Can we move anything? Has anything changed? Because maybe we are doing repairs on something, maybe something like new development has come in and now something takes priority over what has already been described in the asset management plan. So I think we're going to have to shift every year based on what's coming in. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
May I ask you, just give myself permission to ask a question? Looking at the long-term planning thing, there's prioritizing capital renewal over expansion. Could you just speak a little bit more to that? And is it a reflection of, in particular, our aging infrastructure, especially the stuff under the roads? I know that it's been reviewed by the professional staff, and we have approximate ages in some streets of what things are, but Is that what you're talking about in there?
Through the chair, yes, that's kind of where I'm going. I do know that these are budget objectives, right, that were set out last year. So maybe the intention might not be my understanding, and that's why I wanted to make sure we clarified here. But I think we're not trying to do anything net new at this point. It's really just saying, what do we have here? How do we maintain our current service levels, and how do we kind of keep it renewed so that they can continue moving forward?
Thank you. Any other questions, observations? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
I appreciate your comments and your view on asset management. I've probably been listening to asset management for 10 years now, and we do a lot of it at the county as well. But every single conference I've been to and everything I read in newspapers and media, no municipality is going to be able to meet their asset management plan. It's impossible. A lot of the stuff we built was in the 60s when everybody had lots of money, 90 cents on the dollar. And I appreciate staff for looking at, it's not going to be so rigid as it was presented to this newer council as it was in the past, that this is written in stone, you have no choice. I was always hoping that we get to the point of saying this could be delayed 3 or 4 years, or this is more important than this one, and we get to adjust it as time goes on, because this town cannot afford to follow the asset management plan as it was currently written. The plan is fine. It was the idea that it's this or nothing. And I appreciate the fact that we're going to have some options. I'm not so worried about this council. It's the next term and the term after they're going to have the big problems to deal with. One question I do have for you is, and I was going to bring it up at budget time, I'd like to see a list of mandatory projects that and programs that must be adhered to by the town of Perth versus discretionary projects and programs that we'd like to do that we might not be able to do. Because at budget time, that's when, because we don't have the information I understand that you guys have, because we don't do it on a day-to-day basis. But while there are some things in town we'd really like to see done, it might not be able to be achieved if it's just a discretionary item. And hopefully in this year's budget, we can develop a budget that well, I'm going to make a motion about anyway going forward, but I would like to see every project listed as either mandatory because we have to do it for some reason, or discretionary that it's good to have, but maybe not necessarily need to be done. Thank you.
So through the chair, if I can respond to that, is that's exactly what we're doing now. So that is what I am hoping to present to you in the fall, is to say for 2026, these are the projects that we have prioritized, the reason why we consider them to be critical and mandatory to complete. And then that is something that will be brought forward to council to ensure that we're all under the same understanding and we all agree that what the priority is. Great. So the next section is our annual repayment limit. So this goes to talk about how much debt that the municipality can undertake. So I just wanted to kind of do a refresher because I didn't really understand what the annual repayment limit was. So basically what the annual repayment limit is, for anyone who might not know, is really the total amount that the municipality can undertake in repayment of debt in any given year. So when I think about it, I always think of the debt usage like a mortgage. So it's not your total mortgage that you can take out. It's actually your total amount of mortgage payments that you make in 1 year is what is your actual ARL, or annual repayment limit. It's based on the 25% of what the municipality brings in as its own revenue. So things like grants and transfers will not be included in that value that it gets presented in that 25% calculation. So for the town of Perth, for 2025, our annual repayment limit is $3.2 million. Currently, we are at a payments of $722,000, which means that we're using approximately about 22% of our ARL capacity. So for me, that kind of shows me that we are conservative in regards to our debt position and that we actually do have a lot of room under our ARL. It gives us flexibility right now for future capital investments and being able to kind of maintain that financial stability in the short term. This slide I wanted to include just to see where our debt usage was compared to our neighboring municipalities. So I included everyone in here. You'll notice Tay Valley and Drum and North Elmsley obviously have a lot less debt usage, but I will say they also don't have the same infrastructure needs that we have. So which kind of reflects that as well. But based on the other municipalities, I will say that we probably are a bit more conservative than the others in regards to how much debt we have used at this point so far. So how can we really leverage our debt yet still be in a conservative position? So if I go back to my analogy of our mortgage, you don't want to ever take out a mortgage for the full amount that you can actually take out because then you have no other room in case something should happen or if something needs repair or any other expenses that you have. So for me, a conservative approach would be using no more than 50 to 60% of our ARL amount. For me, that would give us flexibility in case there is an emergency. If there are any new priorities that kind of come through, it would give us still strong credit worthiness and it would still lower our risk exposure in case there was any changes into our interest rate. So this next slide, this actually came from the province when I actually got our information for our ARL. So these are just hypothetical amounts that we could borrow based on the different terms and the different rates. So this is, again, the maximum amount that we could take out. So for over 20 years, we could take out at least $43 million if it was around that interest rate. So obviously based on the term and based on the interest rate, the amounts could change. But what I'm really saying here is that I would be more comfortable doing more of a 20 million so that we still have a buffer to borrow for like our new developments and things like that that might have to be done that we weren't expecting. The other point I wanted to bring up is based on when we looked at our asset management plan and the number of projects that needed to do. So I think if we looked at 2035, let's say just in that 1 year in isolation, even if we took out major capital projects that we might not consider, I think it was $70 million in roads, water, and stormwater. So we wouldn't even have the capacity limit to even borrow for that 1 year. And that's kind of where I wanted to really focus on with this is that, yes, we can talk about debt. I think we do need to leverage debt in order to pay for our infrastructure, but it is going to cap out at one point. So it is really important for us to think of new ways of generating revenue because our ARL is based on our revenue. So if we have new revenue, our ARL will also increase, so which will increase the amount that we can actually borrow. But we also just need other ways to be able to fund our infrastructure and the things that we do here.
Any questions, observations at this point? Your worship.
So,
There you go.
okay. Show you read them. Okay, a couple of years ago, the treasurer of the day suggested that since interest rates were low, we might want to borrow $15 million because the interest rates were going to go up, and that would enable us to do quite a few of the projects that we had to eventually do. So I wonder, I don't know what the interest rate the town would pay now, whether that would be considered low. But I just wondered your opinion of borrowing a larger amount, like $15–20 million in that context, that interest rates are low. It will let us go ahead and do a number of projects.
Through the chair. I think at the time when that was brought up, my understanding was that the interest rates were extremely low. So this was kind of, I believe, during that COVID period where we were looking at, a 1% borrowing rate, which is no longer the case here. So I think, we could always look to see what the borrowing rates, but it wouldn't be the same. So I think at that point, it was almost like you were getting you're going to borrow money for nothing. So you could turn that around, put it in a bank account, make interest in it. That would actually offset any of your borrowing costs as well as make you more money. And that wouldn't be the case at this point.
So if we say borrow money like now, it would be sort of like I need a new car in 3 years, so I'm gonna borrow the money now because the interest rates are low and you're paying interest on nothing. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, observations? Thank you. Continue.
So the next section is really talking about now that we know that at one point, our debt capacity will be maxed, is how do we pay for things without using debt? So usually the first thing people will say, and I think the first thing that goes to people's minds are the increased taxes is obviously always one that I wanted to talk about today and what that looks like on the taxpayer. We could also obviously increase our user fees, which I know we have done in the past. I think one thing that the management team is really looking at is new revenue streams. So how do we generate new revenue in different ways than we haven't done before? As well as just making sure that we have grants for our major projects, which I think we've done really well in the past before as well. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that those are really areas where we could do different things instead of borrowing or using debt. And again, one of the other critical things would be that, you could lower service levels, but again, that would obviously impact all of our residents in our town holistically as well. So the next few slides, what I wanted to do, and I think just because it was eye-opening for me, being new to the town, was to really, when you think about tax increases, what that actually looks like over time. Because I think sometimes we can say 6%, we can say 4%, and you're like, okay, that's not that bad. I think I could handle it. But then when you actually see it in numbers, you can kind of see what the impact would be. So I wanted to just share that in some different scenarios that I thought about and what that looked like, so that when we're going into budget season, we have a clear understanding of the impact that would have on our taxpayers. So the first one is just really that 6% compounded annual increase that was kind of an assumption in the 2025 budget. So what it was intended to cover was really the inflationary pressures, cost escalations, obviously, maintaining our service levels, and hopefully, contributing to our reserve. I would say at this point, I think that it is definitely maybe helping with the inflationary pressures, but as we all know, sitting here, the cost escalations for everything have really increased. So I think it would really just be offsetting those two and not really being able to put extra into our reserves at this point to be able to increase them at a rate that we would need it to. So if you go to the next slide, this is what that 6% increase actually looks like for the average tax bill of $3,500. So I know some are higher, I know some are lower, but that's the average really for the town of Perth. So I just wanted to say, I just wanted to show that picture of what that looks like, because I think sometimes we say it and we don't know. I think over 10 years, that based on how everything increases, not only, do your taxes increase, but obviously costs for everything increase, salaries increase. So to me, that one, looked pretty feasible. But I also just wanted to show in numbers what that looks like for our residents. When I was looking at the asset management plan, I thought as a resident myself and a taxpayer, I was like, well, what would I be okay paying for? Like, what's really important to me? So I was like, well, roads are something that I use every day, my kids use every day. I really like driving on something that's not so bumpy. Maybe that's something that I would consider paying for as a taxpayer. So what I did was I did two separate scenarios. I did one where I was like, okay, I would be okay with it. So what if we actually funded all the roads for the next 10 years through just tax repayment, like through an increase in our taxes? And then I did another scenario where we did a hybrid. So half debt or half another way of funding and then increasing our taxes. So this slide is really just my math on how I came up with the numbers, just because I like to show my work. But what happened is if we actually funded all the roads that need to be done within the next 10 years, which would be around 54 million, it would require a one-time increase of 53% on the tax levy or an additional 4.4%. over the next 10 years. Again, if we did the hybrid method, obviously that would mean it would be about half. So it'd be 27% increase on the tax levy or 2.3% increase for over the next 10 years. So the slide after that, if you don't mind, next, thank you, shows the three different impacts on each one. So the first column is really just the 6% increase that we have already implemented. The second column is whether we did a hybrid model. And then the last one would have been if we did roads fully funded based on the tax increases. So for me, when I actually looked at this, I was like, okay, I would not be able to actually pay for that last amount. But what it is something that you can be flexible with going through. So when we do that asset management plan review and we're looking at year over year, well, maybe it's not every year we need to do that, but maybe there's 1 year where roads are like critical and we really need to do it. And we can say, okay, for this 1 year, we're going to fund it through the tax levy. What would that look like? Because the impact wouldn't be as significant. But then this is something I would present to council going forward so that we could have a better understanding of that impact. And so our residents know that we understand what that impact actually looks like. Is there any comments or questions in regard?
Discussion, feedback, any questions, observations? No. Okay.
Great. So the next section is really just what our next steps are. And so for us as management, like I had said, we are really doing that reassessment of that asset management plan, one by department. So everyone can kind of look at their own projects, determine whether what's critical, what's not critical, what can be deferred, what can't be deferred, and explaining why. And then we're going to sit together as a management team and agree on what those priorities are to be able to present that to you later on. Once we have that prioritization, I can then complete that 10-year financial plan to say this is what we're actually going to look like over the next 10 years. And then be able to really critically say, you know, this is how much debt we're going to need. This is how we're going to use it moving forward. The only other thing that I am really hoping to do, and we've had some meetings about, is really engaging the public as well to kind of see, you know, where their concerns are in regards to this budget season and making sure that their concerns and their needs are also being heard as well. From council, what I would like you to do before we get into the next budget season is really think about as well what you would consider essential and deferrable projects, you know, and are you hearing in regards to that, and really understanding what your level of comfort and where you feel the use of debt, taxes, and other funding mechanisms would be. So that when we can come and sit and have that conversation at budget time, that we're not, that we're kind of aligned in regards to how we're going to fund things, what we're all comfortable doing, so that we're not, you know, coming up with new ways at that 11th hour. And my last ask would be is to just educate anyone who comes up to you and asks you. I know I've been asked the question a lot since I've started with the town, is why are my property taxes so high? Is to really understand the projects that are actually going on throughout the municipality, so that, you know, I didn't know everything that happened at the water tower or what was happening, you know, with our you know, with our lagoons and things like that, because I was never a part of it. And it wasn't something that, you know, it affects you every day, you know, inherently if something had gone wrong, but it's not something that I knew about. And I think working for the town, I have a better appreciation of what is going through, how much it actually costs. So I think if I could ask that, you know, and when I come and present the 10-year plan, that you know what those projects are, so that we are able to kind of articulate the costs and why the taxpayer is paying what they are. So I thank you for the time. I know that was a lot of information, but yeah, I'm open to hear any other questions or comments you may have.
Okay, this is the point where it's no longer 2 questions each. Just take what you need to ask. Deputy Mayor.
So Nev, when I see at the county, we get a chart every year about the tax rate paid by taxpayers in each municipality. Perth seems to always be at the highest tax rate of the ones that they compare, like everybody in the county. We had a presentation a couple of years ago saying we may be the highest tax rate, but the average amount of taxes paid by citizens in Perth is lower compared to Mississippi Mills. But that makes total sense to me because they're building $1 million homes in Mississippi Mills, and that's where the richest people in the county live. But where is our tax rate? Are we the highest? Do we have the highest tax rate of any municipality in the county, or can you explain that to me, that statement?
So through the chair, I did take a look at that because I did a comparability for our debt usage, right? And I think when I started to look at that and comparing our tax rate increase from last year to the other municipalities, I don't think it was looking at apples to apples, because I think, like we kind of discussed before, there was an anomaly of how the history of the tax rates work. So maybe in other municipalities, they had a consistent tax rate increase of 2.5% for the last 10 years, where maybe we didn't have one, and now you're having a bigger tax increase here. So I think when I do come to present the last 10 years, I could also then, if you would like, put a comparison of what the other municipalities have. I think the other thing to think about, the amount of kind of corporations and the businesses and the tax mix has a lot to do with that as well.
Anyone else? Yep.
This is question period. So I totally accept the asset management plan, always agreed with it. The one part of the asset management plan I've always had trouble with is our new rink and pool. And I certainly heard in the last couple of years, there's no way the town of Perth can afford to build a rink and a pool based on our current asset management plan. It's not feasible. I think when Director McNally and I were in Toronto, I think it was at Roma, now Kathy, you can help me here. We were asking for money. Two people from the ministry said, if you don't join up regionally on an economic basis, quit asking us for money because you're never going to get it. I went to a presentation with two former chiefs of staff of premiers of Ontario behind closed doors, and they said the same thing, that if you look at from Toronto to Hamilton, everybody is joining into regional economic partnerships now to get what they want. And this is sort of further to Councillor Waterfield's point that the citizens don't really understand. It's not amalgamation I'm looking at. It's how am I going to get, and I want a new rink and pool in Perth, but how are we ever going to get a new recreation facility that'll benefit the taxpayers of Perth, Drummer Elmsey, Tay Valley, and make this dream become a reality in the next, say, 10 years. Because it is a main attraction for people who want to move here, and I'm hoping a lot of people will move to Perth in the next 10 years. But I keep being told all the time, there's no way Perth can afford to do this. And I'm wondering, at a staffing level, have you guys discussed moving forward how we can achieve that?
Yeah, through the chair, I know that different funding mechanisms have been discussed, and I know that the directors have been working hard on different areas on how to come up with funding in regards to that vision. So I think that is something that we're looking at when we're doing that asset management prioritization. And I know that it's not just to say, I think that the expectation is not that, oh, we're getting a new rink and the town's going to pay for it. I think it is looking at different funding strategies to be able to do that.
Yeah, and just through the chair to add to that, no one's ever suggested, or at least not in the last number of years, that we'll ever pay for a new pool and rink by ourselves. It's never been a discussion topic. It's always been a regional or a joint facility, at least between our two neighbors, if not even further. Kathy and I have been having several meetings recently with representatives from the private sector looking at public-private partnership options, and we're moving down that path, exploring what that might look like in Perth and whether that's feasible. So there are lots of other potential options for funding.
Yeah, if I may, just before you speak, can I just, from the chair point of view and what's heard outside of here or what's interpreted outside of here, I think it's fair to say that this council has discussed that recreationally we're looking at them being regional resources wherever they're located. We've had that discussion before. Is that fair, Deputy Mayor, that's where you're coming from? The town of Perth is not suggesting amalgamation. We're talking about certain resources in recreation.
I think we have. I'm not necessarily sure the region has. That's my concern, is that the time has come for the town of Perth to make it clear to the citizens, not necessarily to the elected officials, that Perth is not going to be building this next facility on their own. It has to be a joint facility, funded joint. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
Michael, that's up to you guys, but I'm just saying, I hope that the citizens understand that it's a regional facility that has to be funded regionally. It can't be on the backs of one small municipality. It's my hope in the future anyway.
Yeah, the mayor and I, shortly after the last election, went and met with our counterparts at Tay Valley, Drummond North Elmsley, and Lanark Highlands. Every single other mayor, Reeve and Deputy Reeve, said, yes, we recognize the pool and the arenas are regional facilities. They draw people to all of our communities. And yes, they're regional. They're not Perth. They're all of ours. And we all commit to funding them.
Yes, and then Councillor Waterfield. Thank you.
My last question. So when does our current cost sharing agreement expire? Is it this year or did it expire last year? Last year. So we're into the middle of 2025. Have we signed a new cost sharing agreement 6 months after the last one expired? And where are we in negotiations? Because I've heard different things. I'd just like to know. If you can't talk about it now, I totally understand, but I wasn't sure if it ended last year or this year. And I know there's been some difficulties in our past negotiations. And this is one of my concerns moving forward is I had one of the Reeves say to me, we're certainly willing to fund towards to buy services from you, but we're not interested in funding the development of a new recreation facility. So it's just an issue. I think that it's a big thing over our head in the next 10 years. And I think it's a very difficult task for staff to achieve.
Councillor Waterfield.
Building upon the comments of the Deputy Mayor, looking at regional needs, I think it's really important that each of our nearby communities, we do not budget in isolation. If we are looking at agreeing to fund a recreational facility down the road, we cannot work in silos in terms of budgeting. There needs to be communication during the budgeting process of each of our nearby municipalities, not only for the recreation facility perhaps down the road, but perhaps other joint ventures as well. Because to have other communities have their budgets all done and not knowing what they put aside for the future regionally, we just won't meet the objectives that the Deputy Mayor is talking about.
I just noticed that Director McNally has moved forward up the chessboard. So did you want to speak to that?
Sure. Through the chair, just to acknowledge the concerns brought up related to recreation facilities and the future within the area. We are having discussions with our neighbors in terms of what does the future look like, because we can see the writing on the wall in terms of government funding and asset management planning. So as Michael had stated, we're looking at different opportunities for what funding could look like. We've had discussions about doing the location study to see about where a facility would look, but we paused that conversation only because we want to look at some opportunities before coming back together with the different municipalities to discuss future options.
Would it be, there's a question from the chair to council, would it be fair to say that our council's concern is if we started putting money aside or budgeting for an event and no one else was, there's really no purpose on that, given that we have other pressures?
For my part, Chair, I would agree with you. And that hence my earlier comment in terms of each individual municipality not budgeting in isolation. If we're going to do a budget for next year and put X number of dollars aside with all the financial pressures we're under, I want to know as a councillor, are we in this together with other municipalities and are they doing the same thing or not?
Thank you. Any other questions pertaining to that specific issue or from the presentation? Seeing none, Councillor Smith.
In view of the help that we've had from individual citizens in the past on various things, would it be feasible or likely that we should be pursuing that road as well.
I think that may be, we've got both directors there, part of this other means of financing.
Yes, so through the chair for opportunities such as that, that's where we would, once we have those bigger conversations, we'd come to council and say, this is what our proposed concepts would be. And that would include, let's say, for instance, a public-private partnership, but also what does sponsorship look like in terms of outreach? And what does that long-term planning look like in terms of, is it a committee that's going to be coming together to raise the funds for it? So it would be having to look at a number of different revenue streams to help us come to that reality for sure.
Is it then easier to get a grant when you've got a individual willing to put out a certain amount of money?
Through the chair, I would say no, because the most previous funding that went out was $200 million that was allotted by the Ministry of Sport, which is a great amount of money. However, the amount of requested funding was $2 billion. So only 10% of funding requested actually was successful in it. And I believe only 2 new builds were part of that. And one example is Elliott Lake hasn't had an arena for 3 years. And so they desperately needed it. So in the current state with provincial funding that's available, I would say that we'd have to look at other avenues to help us complete that funding need.
Thank you.
Your worship.
Thank you. I think in the ongoing process of trying to get the other municipalities to cooperate on us with a regional recreational facility, one thing that should be pointed out to them is that this is a new pool, a new rink, et cetera, et cetera. Recreation facilities is an economic development initiative. I know one of the doctors in town, he moved from Perth to Stittsville because it had more opportunities with sports and so on for his kids. Opportunities he wasn't finding here. So it's something to keep in mind when we're negotiating.
Through the chair, I don't think the neighboring municipalities would disagree with that statement. And I think our recreation master plan is a really good example of collaboration. And they understand, I think, just what the importance of what those recreation facilities and opportunities present. And so I think that they wouldn't disagree with that.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'm going to ask Councillor Waterfield if you could read the connected motion for 4.2.
As recommended by the Committee of the Whole, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Perth receive for information the financial update, August 2025, as presented in Report 2025, Cal 8.2.
Any further questions, observations? I'll call the question. Those in favour? That's unanimous by all present. So we reach number 5. The next regular Committee of the Whole is a long way off at 5:30 today. And any questions from the media? None online. Oh, good. Okay, 7, the adjournment. Councillor Smith, please. Thank you. Call the question. Those in favour? Thank you very much, Council. I'll see you shortly.